Hello everyone and welcome to 2025. As of now, we are officially over halfway through the 2020s, and if me saying that did not just make you instinctively cringe and cower, then I wish I had your mental fortitude. However, it is not all bad. In fact, this decade has brought many great things, such as games, and specifically JRPGs. Since we're at the midpoint of the decade then, I thought I'd get started on one of those best of the decade lists early. A status update for how things have gone so far, and so I wanted to make this list of my top 10 favorite JRPGs of the decade so far. As with any list I make though, this will obviously come with some important notes. Number 1, I am of course only including games that I have played on this list. Some examples of notable JRPGs of the decade that I haven't played include, but are not limited to, Yakuza Like a Dragon and the Final Fantasy VII Remake/Rebirth games. Number 2, this is purely my personal opinion. I'll admit broader trends may push a game over the top, but otherwise it is entirely up to me to decide which game makes sense for this list. Number 3, remakes are eligible for this list, but remasters are not. Number 4, this ranking will be in Western release date chronological order from when they were released, oldest to newest. There is no inherent superiority from the ranking. I would of course love to hear your own lists down in the comments, but now it's time to start on mine. Let's go. Our first game is the only one on this list from the year 2020, and is also one of the reasons I had to specify the Western release date, but there was no way I was leaving Persona 5 Royal off this list. There's a magic around this game that I think has been hard for other games to capture. I'll start with the flashy visuals and sheer sense of style. With its dominant red colors paired well with occasional black, Persona 5 feels bold. The cutscenes have an amazing dynamism that keeps the blood pumping, and then you top it off with the music. Persona 5's music is absolutely incredible, and that's in every part of the game, from the pumping battle themes to the contemplative area themes. There is no part of this jazz-inspired soundtrack that fails to please the ears. As for story, over time more cracks in Persona 5 storytelling and character writing have shown, but the highs of the game are still peeking out over the clouds. This goes doubly so for the third semester edition for Persona 5 Royal, which in my opinion greatly enhanced the entire game. The characters suck you into the game and help alleviate any story malaise in this very long adventure because they are incredibly lovable. The social simulation has just the right blend of class time, social activity time, and other things to do to keep you engaged, and then there's the dungeon crawling. The combat is solid all around and the levels are impeccably designed. The Persona series deserves that intricate dungeon design for all its games moving forward. If Persona 6 doesn't have it, then I will be sorely disappointed. There isn't an area of this game that is not at least good, and most of them are great. There's a reason Persona 5 became the default comparison for all RPGs moving forward. The inspiration for many games among RPGs from AAA to indie. Persona 5 mastered the social simulation dungeon crawling feel, and I think at the end of this decade, Persona 5 Royal will likely still be one of the most influential games of the decade in general. Now, 2021 produced quite a few quality titles. There are 3 releases from that year on the list. The first one was released in Japan in 2019 like Persona 5 Royal, but it took a little while to come to the West, arriving in early 2021, and that would be the action RPG Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. The Ys series is one of the oldest still running RPG series. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is the final game in what is called the party system era for Ys, where you had 3 characters fighting at the same time that you could switch between as you fought. The plot centers around Adol Kristen, as most Ys games do, in the prison city of Balduc. After meeting and getting shot by a mysterious woman, Adol gains the powers of a monstrum. These monstrum powers are one of my favorite things about Ys 9, as they expand the city in every direction and allow you a chance to move around the space dynamically. The combat is so smooth and responsive, giving the same sort of action rush that has kept the Ys series up there among my favorite games in recent memory. Plot-wise, this game is going to take you for a ride, mostly in a good way, I would say, and if you're someone who has dedicated their time to playing previous Ys games, you'll get some extra enjoyment out of the experience for all that Ys 9 does with the lore. In a lot of ways, Ys 9 suffers in comparison to its predecessor, the superb Ys 8 The Lacrimosa of Dana, but I argued back in 2021, and still argue now, that Ys 9 is a really good game, worthy of praise for its strong qualities. Our next title is one of the remakes on this list, or at least, I believe it is a remake, and thus is eligible for this list, but there are plenty that say this is a remaster instead. Hey, my list, my rules, and that is why NieR Replicant version 1.22474487139 is the next game I want to talk about. NieR Replicant has many things going for it. A fantastic core group of characters that I absolutely adore. A narrative that expands and deepens as you explore through every single ending of the game, as well as deepening our connection to the characters I mentioned before, and also this world that we've spent so much time in. There is even a whole new ending and some other story content that originally got cut out that is added back in for this release, and I can't believe that wasn't in the original because it is fantastic. All of this writing is further built upon by the absolutely beautiful soundtrack that blends nostalgic tunes with epic battle music and some haunting songs to connect with the many moments where the darker aspects of the story come to the fore. Visually, the game looks amazing. Great standout character designs, rich use of color, and an aesthetic that is instantly recognizable as a NieR game. NieR Replicant has a lot of creative and unique ideas on how to tell said story and engage the players, and then we come to the main thing that made this a remake to me rather than a remaster: the combat. The style of action was changed and smoothed out to be more akin to NieR Replicant's sequel, NieR Automata, than the clunkier original, and I think that was for the best. I adored how the different weapons changed up fighting, the deceptive simplicity of the combat that was at its peak for the spectacular boss fights that challenged us. Although NieR Replicant did quite well overall, I sometimes wish that this game got the attention that NieR Automata, also a really good game, got, because I think there would be even more people nodding along to be gushing about this game than there already are. Our third and final 2021 game for the list is a new IP. One of a few on the list, and I'm always glad to see fun new IPs because there are so many series out there that it's good to shake things up once in a while. That means that games like Scarlet Nexus stand out all the more. Set in a futuristic sci-fi world where characters have various superpowers, Scarlet Nexus already had me intrigued on the premise, and then we come to the story and gameplay. The story takes on two perspectives, each with their own path to play between Yuito and Kasane. The story is solid with some great moments, and the divided storyline gives a lot of reasons to play through, allowing you the chance to learn more about the world and characters. I think a lot of thought went into the world building around this land with the various powers, and the political dynamics and character relationships form the backbone of the narrative. What also had me hooked for the game was the action combat gameplay. Between the regular dodging and attacking, you have the powers of you and your various party members that have so many different uses to take down enemies. Some powers work incredibly well in tandem, others you need to use just at the right moment to take advantage. It truly feels like a unique power system and makes every encounter a new challenge. The monster designs as well look fantastically weird with a blend of plant, animal, and machine that I've never seen before or since. Due to the budget nature of the game, there are a lot of still frames that do take away from the overall product, but between the fun music, lively voice acting, and truly brilliant action sequences when the game was able to show them, I had a blast with Scarlet Nexus. I've always hoped that Bandai Namco would give the property another chance to show what it could do, and I'm not giving up that hope yet. 2022 brings us two games to add to the list, and coincidentally they were released very close to one another. The first is the remake for Live Alive, a game originally from 1994 that, while considered a seminal work and influential even beyond Japan, never was released in the West until this remake came. Live Alive takes you through 8 different scenarios with different protagonists ranging from the era of the caveman to a tense space adventure. The gameplay shifts brilliantly between them and none overstay their welcome with fun characters and scenarios. Each scenario feels different to go through and like its own self-contained adventure and story, which leaves you satisfied and ready for more at the end. While there is variance in quality, it goes from just okay to absolutely brilliant, with most landing in a good to great range. What takes the system from a fun set of vignettes to a classic is the way the game handles the latter half, with the final scenarios you go through where everything comes together. I'm not going to go into more detail because part of the beauty of what Live Alive does is simply how it tells that final story, so I'll go into other details. The various combat systems you come across have a lot of creativity in how they adjust to the eras in each character's skill set, which comes in handy once you've brought them all together as well. The art is also very distinct in part because the studio originally used different artists for each scenario, but the team did a good job making it still feel like all one world, especially for the remake. Yoko Shimomura performed her usual wizardry with the soundtrack, and the HD 2D style of the remake managed to keep and update many of the great aspects of the art. It took a long time for the West to get Live Alive, and I was worried it would not resonate with me given all the iterating that had happened in the gaming space since then, and I was blown away instead. A fantastic remake of a classic game. The second 2022 game is a game that I feel confident calling a modern classic. A game that took the brilliance of the games before it in the series and distilled it into an absolutely astounding final product on all fronts. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is my favorite game from this selection. I'm not ranking any of the others, but as of right now, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is my game of the decade. Let's start with a gripping story of personal trauma and stakes with significant philosophical thought put into the tragedy of the circumstances the characters find themselves in. And it's filled with amazing characters. The performances behind all of the characters are absolutely brilliant as well, and I'll watch character compilations of them just to reminisce and admire the depth of emotion in their acting. Then we come to a world beautiful in its diverse flora and fauna with so much to explore and find around the map, a brilliant score highlighting every moment of the game from beginning to end, art that feels like it shouldn't work as well as it does on the Switch and certainly not at that same scale, but does. A combat system that, despite the craziness of controlling a party of 6 in active battle, has so much fun progression and customization to build the characters and battle a host of tough enemies that you're ready to jump in. Xenoblade 3 really serves as both an incredible standalone game and a fantastic continuation of the themes and stories laid out in Xenoblade 1 and 2. Add on top of that an incredible DLC story in Future Redeemed, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 truly has everything that I could possibly ask for in an RPG. I wish I could go into further detail, but take my word for it. Play Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and experience one of the best stories video games have to offer. Now, 2023 has only one game to add to the list, a game that built on its predecessor brilliantly to make something better in almost every way. Octopath Traveler 2 took the good that Octopath Traveler came up with, propped up what was mediocre before, and smoothed out any poor areas. The result is an incredibly good game starting with the stories. While there is still a variance in quality, all of the characters' stories are entertaining and showcase the characters' journeys and personalities well. The increased character interaction with the cross-path story gave us an actual sense of our party having bonds in other adventures. Then we come to how the games tied them all together, like with Live Alive earlier. I think these anthology games can be broken by a poor tying of the threads, and that was an area Octopath Traveler suffered. Octopath Traveler 2 sprinkles in the later conflict and clues to what was going on behind the scenes throughout all the adventures, and makes for a satisfying conclusion that we are well invested in because of the events from before. Couple that with an improved art style, a similarly brilliant soundtrack from Yasunori Nishiki, and decent vocal performances, and you're doing good even before we get into gameplay. The battle system retains a lot of the fun elements of the original game with some new twists to the character classes, the quality of life, speed up option, and the flashy super moves that makes every battle more exciting. The different path actions you could perform changing with the day and night cycle was another genius addition to keep the gameplay fresh and expand what we could do with each of the characters. I know many people who weren't that fond of Octopath Traveler who absolutely adored Octopath Traveler 2 because the developers did a lot to make it a quality experience in all areas without losing that core identity they created with the first game. It was a delicate tightrope, but they managed it, and that's what lands Octopath Traveler 2 a place on this list. 2024 brings the last 3 games for the list. I think 2024 was a strong year for new ideas and innovations, and I'll use these games to make that argument, starting with Unicorn Overlord. A strategy game from noted ziggers rather than zaggers Vanillaware, Unicorn Overlord brought to my attention and many others a style of strategic battles that is actually decades old but fell out of favor. Unicorn Overlord emulated Ogre Battle by making you, as the player, create units of characters that fight against your enemies. Play around and pair up various different characters and see how the synergies work out to decimate your foes. The uniqueness of each of the characters, their abilities, their classes, their personalities made playing around with the game a blast. Some units would be in great shape against certain opponents and crummy against others, and it was on me as the strategist to adjust and find victory anyways. Sure, the main plot is a fairly standard prince reclaiming the throne from a corrupt empire who overthrew his mother tale. The story, though, is elevated in part by the aforementioned personality-filled characters and by the fantasy world in which this game is set. Our ragtag bunch of allies aren't limited to just humans, but also elves, bestials, and angels, all of whom are filled with character and well acted too. A solid soundtrack and a pleasing art style that may make you want to eat your screen during the tavern visits helps Unicorn Overlord stand out. I couldn't get enough of the game. Despite my proclivity for long RPGs, there are plenty of times when I get burned out and struggle to get through the slower middle part or the interminable end of games. Unicorn Overlord not only never made me feel that way, but burrowed into my brain and kept me thinking about it for hours outside of playing it. Now for our next game, I'm sure those of you who have been here before know that the Trails series would be making an appearance at some point on this list. Trails Through Daybreak is an excellent addition to the long-running interconnected series of Trails, and hopefully the start to another great arc in the overall story of Trails. That being said, while there are the obligatory character cameos and connections to past games, Trails Through Daybreak serves as a solid standalone title, allowing newcomers and older players alike to enjoy its treasures. Trails Through Daybreak innovated significantly on the series' tradition, mainly with gameplay bringing in a hybrid system to let players get through some encounters in active combat while retaining the turn-based command battles and including more positioning strategy in those. Then we have an improved emphasis on animation with a new graphics engine, a vibrant new country to visit, and a well-cast group of characters who are voiced too little. Nice, I can pay that additional fee for more voice acting. Hit me up. Trails Through Daybreak has all of the Trails series strengths, a cast of characters that feel alive from our main party to the enemies, our allies to the NPCs who inhabit the world, a battle system that tests us while also giving us fun and creative new ways to break it. Yeah, Trails balancing is likely never going to be perfect. As with a lot of Trails games though, the beauty of the game is the promise of more. This is just a part of the journey, a very fun part, and we can get even more if we stick around for the next game. Finally, there was one last 2024 release to round out the list, a game that I'm sure many of you have been expecting on it. Metaphor ReFantazio, the newest Atlas RPG that embraced fantasy and its setting in a delightful way. Metaphor ReFantazio, like Unicorn Overlord, presents us with a land rich in diverse races, varied landscapes, and a looming threat that only we have the answer to. Metaphor embraces the political depth of the setting as well, showing that even a kingdom united has divisions baked into its foundations that we as a cast must overcome. Our cast is pitted against incredibly powerful and compelling foes and tasked to journey around the land, which allows the game to have the best of the serene world-traveling adventure and the tense fight against an implacable, powerful foe that seeks to remake the world in one game. The turn-based combat builds on the best of the systems you've seen in previous Atlas works to give a satisfying feeling of chaining together abilities to take down difficult foes. It does also have an action element, but it's not as well developed as Trails Through Daybreak's. On top of that though, the archetype system keeps you customizing and adjusting to tackle your next opponent to the delight of those who revel in playing with various classes and abilities. The world feels distinct in part because of the creative art style and design for all the races, all the enemies, and all the individual characters. Metaphor ReFantazio is an incredibly bold game that succeeds in most areas and captured mine and many others' imaginations at the end of last year. That's how it managed to make its way into my top 10 JRPGs from this decade so far. Just to recap then, those top 10 in chronological order are Persona 5 Royal, Ys 9 Monstrum Nox, NieR Replicant, Scarlet Nexus, Live Alive, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Octopath Traveler 2, Unicorn Overlord, Trails Through Daybreak, and Metaphor ReFantazio. It's been a great start to the decade with all these fantastic games. However, I do imagine this list will look very different after the next 5 years are complete. I actually made a similar list for the 2010s for reference, and out of that list, 4 came out in the first half of the 2010s, with 6 coming out in the second half. Maybe someday I'll make a video for that one too. Now though, it's your chance to let me know what your favorite JRPGs from this decade have been, and also, if you're feeling like making a prediction, what is the upcoming game that you think is most likely to break into your top list? For me, it's got to be the Trails in the Sky remake, but you never know when a game will come and surprise you. Thank you for sticking around until the end. Leave the video a like and subscribe to keep up with my channel. I also want to thank all of you who made January 2025 one of the best months for the channel so far. I'm hoping to keep up that momentum going forward, so stick around for some February fun. Have a great day, and happy gaming.